Reginald Thorpe gripped the steering wheel of his sleek, black limousine, the vehicle gliding effortlessly along the winding country road. Beside him, his father, Charles Thorpe, reclined in the back seat, his lips curled into a perpetual smirk as he glanced out at the rolling hills and quaint houses. They often took these drives, savoring the feeling of superiority as they passed through the picturesque but modest countryside. The tranquil scene was abruptly interrupted when Reginald spotted a lone cyclist pedaling up ahead. Without a second thought, he swerved sharply, forcing the cyclist into a ditch. The young man, dressed in a white coat now smeared with mud, scrambled to his feet, his bicycle twisted and broken beside him. "What were you thinking, riding out here?" Reginald sneered, stepping out of the car. "You could have damaged my car." David Carter, bruised and shaken, looked up, his heart pounding. "I was just trying to get to work," he replied, his voice steady despite the humiliation. Charles chuckled from the back seat, not bothering to get out. "Poor people should stick to the sidewalks," he said with a dismissive wave. "You don't belong on the road." David's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and helplessness as he surveyed his ruined bike. The two men continued to berate him before finally driving off, leaving him coughing in a cloud of dust. Alone and muddy, David felt a deep sense of injustice, but resolved to continue on foot to Oakwood Medical Center, where his skills were needed. Several days later, the serene atmosphere of the Thorpe estate was shattered by the shrill ring of a phone. Reginald's wife, Amanda, answered, her face quickly draining of color as she listened. Their 7-year-old son, Ethan, had collapsed and was rushed to the emergency room. The diagnosis was grim, a rare congenital heart defect requiring immediate surgery. Panic ensued as the Thorpe family rushed to Oakwood Medical Center. There, in the stark, antiseptic corridors, Reginald and Charles found themselves at the mercy of a situation where their wealth offered no solace. Amanda was inconsolable, and for the first time, Reginald felt a gnawing fear that money couldn't alleviate. In the waiting room, a nurse approached them. "The only surgeon capable of performing this operation is Dr. David Carter. He's the best in the field." Reginald and Charles exchanged confused glances. The name didn't ring a bell, but Reginald, always quick to leverage his wealth, said arrogantly, "We'll pay him whatever he wants. Just get him here and make sure he saves my son." The nurse nodded, though there was a hint of disapproval in her eyes. "Dr. Carter is already here. He's preparing for the surgery." Minutes felt like hours as they waited, the reality of their situation slowly dawning on them. The antiseptic smell of the hospital, the muted sounds of medical equipment, and the anxious whispers of other families formed a stark contrast to the luxurious surroundings they were used to. When David finally walked in, clad in his surgical scrubs, Reginald and Charles stared at him, initially not recognizing the mud-caked cyclist they had bullied days before. "Dr. Carter," Reginald began, his tone still carrying a trace of arrogance, "please save our son. We know how important this is, and we can make it worth your while." David met their gaze with a calm, professional demeanor. "My job is to save lives, regardless of who the patient is. Your son is in good hands. But remember, some lessons in life are learned the hard way." Recognition slowly dawned on Reginald and Charles. The surgeon standing before them was the same man they had humiliated a few days ago. A mix of shock and shame washed over their faces, stripping away the remnants of their arrogance. "You," Reginald stammered, his voice faltering. "We didn't know." David nodded, his expression unreadable. "I know. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a surgery to perform." Hours passed as the Thorpe family waited, their previous arrogance replaced by a profound sense of helplessness and regret. Amanda's tears flowed freely, while Reginald and Charles sat in silence, grappling with the magnitude of their actions. Finally, David emerged from the operating room, his face tired but composed. The surgery was successful. Your son is going to be fine. Relief and gratitude flooded the Thorpe family. Reginald grasped David's hand, his voice choked with emotion. Thank you, Dr. Carter. We owe you everything. David looked at the family, seeing them now as fellow human beings rather than the embodiments of arrogance and privilege. Take care of your son. And maybe think about how you treat people in the future. As the Thorpe family embraced, their once impenetrable facade of superiority cracked, revealing a newfound humility. In that moment, they understood that true strength lay not in wealth or power, but in compassion and respect for others. David walked away, leaving them to their private moment of revelation. He knew he had not only saved a life, but perhaps had also planted the seed of change in a family that desperately needed it. And in doing so, he reaffirmed his own belief in the profound impact of humility and kindness. The Thorpes' transformation wasn't immediate, but over time, they began to see the world through different eyes. They used their wealth not just for personal gain, but to help those less fortunate. They became patrons of the hospital, supporting medical advancements and accessibility for all.